If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey, ghoul friend. It's me, Adrian, or Ayden. Either way, I want to ask you to wish Susto a happy birthday. As we celebrate the upcoming 5th anniversary of Susto and its dedication to exploring the rich tapestry of Latin American and Hispanic folklore, I invite you to join me in taking this paranormal project to the next level. Over the past 5 years, I've delved deep into the mysterious realms of ghostly apparitions, supernatural legends, and chilling tales that have captivated audiences worldwide. Now, as I embark on the next chapter of this journey into the unknown, I need your support to enhance your experience as a listener. Your generous donation will allow me to invest in a new recording setup, ensuring that future spine-chilling narratives are captured with crystal ball clarity and devilish detail. With upgraded equipment, I'll be able to host ghoulish guests with greater ease and transport you even deeper into the heart of darkness, where legends come alive and the paranormal awaits. Every dollar contributed will aid in advancing the quality of Susto, enabling me to continue preserving and sharing the enchanting folklore of Latin American and Hispanic cultures with the world. Join me in celebrating 5 years of fear-inducing tales and help me amplify this spooky saga for many more to come. Together, we can unlock the secrets of the supernatural and keep the spirit of storytelling alive. To make a donation, you can visit gofund.me/10bcdc27. Thank you for your support, and may the spirits guide you on your journey through the unknown. Eternally yours, Adrian or Ayden. Either way. Friends, it's me, Adrian, or Ayden. Either way, I am still your host, and you are still listening to Susto, the podcast of Ookie Spooky Scary Stories. Welcome back. Thank you for being here, and if this is your first time, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Ghoul friends, just to let you know off the bat, this episode is available in video format on Patreon to Best Ghoul Friends. That's patreon.com/SustoPodcast. I'm very excited about today's episode, and as you can see in the title, and I slightly teased it, I think last week I posted something on my stories about this recording session, and I had the book Malicia in the frame of that picture. So as you've probably guessed by now, we are interviewing Steven dos Santos, the author of Malicia. Steven was an amazing guest and is an amazing author. So if you haven't had the chance, please check out his book. It's available now everywhere books are sold. This episode, as always, is spoiler free. We do talk about the book and we talk about Steven and his work, but rest assured, nothing is spoiled. So I'm very excited for you to hear this episode. As always, you can be on Susto in a Letters from Beyond episode. All you need to do is send your scary story, a video, picture, audio recording, whatever you have that is paranormal or spooky, send it over to me. You already know how, in an email, a DM on social media, in a review or a Q&A of Spotify, or by visiting sustopodcast.com. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into today's episode, which is a very special interview with Steven dos Santos. Ghoul friends, please welcome our very special guest today, friend of the pod now, Steven dos Santos. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course, of course. So, Steven, could you introduce yourself to the audience, to maybe someone who hasn't heard of you yet?
Okay, Steven dos Santos. I'm a writer. I'm also a college professor. I teach English composition, creative writing, science fiction, fantasy, and horror lit. Malicia is actually my fifth novel. I'd taken a little break, but I have a trilogy, the Torchkeeper trilogy, which was published in 2013. And I also have a paranormal espionage novel called Dagger, The Dust Ops. So, yeah, I'm a writer, English professor, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Thank you. We're so happy to have you in our haunted house, if you will. I was so excited about Malicia when I heard about it because I was reading, the kind of the press release that we get, right, for the advanced reading copies. And I was like, this is right up my alley. This is perfect for anyone who listens to Susto, for anyone who's interested in this kind of content. And so I just wanted to know a little bit more about you as a writer, especially with your journey with Malicia. So can you tell us about how you started writing and maybe what initially drew you to storytelling in the first place?
Oh, well, definitely. I mean, in terms of I always loved writing, even when I was a kid. And I remember my first short story I wrote, I was in second grade, called The Enchanted Prince, and I actually illustrated it. Even back then, I was all about magic and romance and all that kind of fun stuff. And then over the years, I would write for the school newspaper. I always told myself, I want to write. I even sat down years and years ago to try to write a novel. Didn't get very far, but it wasn't until early 2000s where a coworker, I was talking to a coworker. I used to work in a law office, and she was telling me about how she would go to these writers groups at the bookstores. At the time, Borders was all over the place, and Barnes and Noble is still here, but even though there's not as many left. And she told me about these writing groups where people would bring their manuscripts and they would give each other critique and feedback. And she's like, if you want to write, you really should do this. So I remember for Christmas that year, she gave me a book. I think it was called Writing Children's Books for Dummies.
Oh,
and the funny thing about it, though, it was very resourceful because it had a lot of I didn't know anything about like the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators and the whole procedure on how you had to query and get an agent and the publishing houses. So that really was the catalyst that drove me to want to start telling my stories. And of course, I wrote my very first novel was this. It looked like a telephone book, the old-fashioned telephone books. It was like 500-page middle-grade fantasy novel where I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing, and I remember showing up to my very first manuscript critique group at Borders Bookstore with my huge volume, and that's when my journey began, because it was through the writing group that I discovered the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. I started going to the conferences, meeting agents and editors, and that's how I met my very first agent. Because I graduated from writing middle grade, I said, I'm a little bit constrained here, so I want to take this further. I want to start writing more. What I like about YA is there's that immediacy and that urgency of the characters. They're teens and they're just very passionate about life. They haven't become jaded or bitter. So, so I shifted the focus, but I also wanted to include LGBT characters, which at the time, as I soon discovered, was not very popular in the publishing industry.
Yeah, unfortunately. And that's part of why I was so excited to read this book and why it resonated so much with me is because of the queer characters in the book. Like you said, it was difficult for you to get these kinds of stories out. I'm sure it's gotten, or hopefully it's gotten easier over time. But, I remember reading when I was younger in junior high and high school and not being able to find literature that I felt represented in. So it was really special what you've done.
It was quite the challenge because this was back in, this is not that long ago. This was I would say 2007, 2008. And I remember when I started going on queries, when I started querying the book, I should say, it wasn't Malicia, it was a different book. And the feedback I would get would be like, oh, this is such a great book, is it possible you could change the gender of the characters? And then one agent at the time actually put it in writing. She said, I love this book. This would make a fantastic series. However, and then she proceeded to go into this whole marketing explanation that the majority of the audience for YA are female and not gay, and nobody's going to buy books that have gay characters. I'm saying, and this was 2008.
Wow.
You imagine how discouraging it was to hear that, because it was like they're basically saying, I don't want you to write books about people like you. So, but good luck. If you have something else, we'd be willing to look at that.
Yeah, anything else.
Yes, anything else. So,
wow.
But you know what? I was determined at that point, I am not going to let this stop me. So I started writing another book, which became the Torchkeeper series. And that very first book, actually, I went on to finally sell that book. And it actually made that year, that was 2013, it made the American Library Association's Rainbow List Top 10 selection. So I went from being told no gay characters to at least getting that. But even then, it was kind of one of those things at the time where publishers, because I even had publishers talk to me at conferences, and they, even back then, it was almost like one of those things where, like, okay, well, we already have our one gay book for the season.
Yeah.
so we can't have two, you know.
Yeah.
So now, and I'm so like happy to see how that has changed so much in the past 10 years.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, and because of people like you who kept trying to put the work out there, who, despite being told no in multiple ways, you still went for it. So thank you for your contribution to that. And I'm sure that so many other spooky little queers like I was in high school are going to get their hands on this book and love it. But I mean, speaking of spooky and the paranormal, this book is so steeped in folklore. Can you tell us about the folklore or paranormal myths that you heard growing up or even recently as an adult?
Oh, sure. Well, definitely. I remember growing up. I grew up, my family is Dominican. I have a strong Dominican roots. And I would hear stories about some of the legends. Like there was one at Cuckoo, which was kind of like the equivalent of the boogeyman. So you had to behave yourself. Otherwise, this boogeyman creature would come and get you. And all sorts of things with brujas and witches. And it's not like the kind of witches that most people might be familiar with. These were witches were really, not only were they old crones, but then the way that it would work, that they would actually take their skin off at night, God. And they would hang their skin, and then that's when they would go off flying in their brooms, and they also could transform into like bird-like creatures. So I always had a really vivid imagination, and a lot of these stories stuck with me. And even when I was writing about other things, I always gravitated towards paranormal, supernatural. Though, I mean, as far as movies, I love horror movies. So those stories always stuck with me, and I was so pleased that I finally got a chance to incorporate some of those in this book.
Yeah. One of the things that I like about doing my show is making connections to other cultures. So I'm Mexican American, and a lot of the stories that I heard grew up are from Mexico and South Texas. I grew up right on the border. And so reading not only your book, but reading, other folklore from other parts of the diaspora, if you will, it's been so fun to make connections. And in reading your book and just hearing you talk right now, I'm thinking about like, okay, a shape-shifting kind of bird creature. We have like our own kind of legend like that from Mexican culture, or El Cucu, we call him El Cucuy, but it's essentially the same thing. So just seeing how these stories span across different cultures and honestly like bridge them, it's so fun. And I love having that conversation with people.
Yeah, and it's funny because another one that's most people have heard of, the chupacabra. Of course, Puerto Rico, but it was also in lots of other places too, including the Dominican Republic and actually Florida, where I live as well. Yeah,
I was actually wanted to ask you about that. So in your book, when you're talking about the chupacabras, they're presented as these like aquatic creatures. And growing up, I always heard of them as landlocked creatures. So they're on ranches, they're in agricultural areas. So I was just curious about the background of chupacabras that you heard growing up.
Well, I mean, one of the things, like I said, in Florida, because we have the Everglades, which is like swampy area. So to me, I always associated them with swamps and water and murkiness. And, there's that reptilian and they have the spikes. So I know, when I was creating this book, I kind of still carried over that water theme. But again, it's just a variation because every culture has a different take on it.
Yeah, and it would make sense to go that way because the evergreens are so like lush with vegetation under the surface of the water, so it's kind of hard to see through. So yeah, you really don't know what lurks in those waters sometimes.
Yes.
So in Malicia, we follow the journey of 4 characters, and they're each navigating their own inner demons, if you will, while also trying to survive this night of horrors at this abandoned amusement park. Can you tell us what you were hoping for the audience to take from each of their journeys?
Yes, actually. I'll tell you, what from the existing version, there's a lot of things that didn't make it. I think we could hopefully talk about some of the stuff that didn't make it in. But as far as their existing journeys, what I wanted to go for is, they each had a secret that they were kind of keeping from everyone else, some more so than others. And I wanted to explore, because the whole thing with horror and the supernatural, I always think it's interesting when a lot of it comes from the individual characters themselves. So in exploring the fact that they each have these secrets, that they're keeping things from each other, that actually what they're keeping from each other is contributing to some of the horrible things that happen in the story, I think is quite fascinating because, I mean, I don't think we have to worry too much about spoiler territory because I think the back of the book pretty much says Ray brings them all to this island. Yes, he has, of course, innocent intentions, but basically he's just put all his dear friends in danger. So I always think that's, while I love the creatures and the monsters and all the blood and all that kind of fun stuff, I love that whole human interaction and how a lot of the scares come from the things that we do to each other.
Absolutely. I'm constantly saying it on the show that the living scare me more than the dead. That will always reign true for me. So yeah, this is a great example of the horrors of not only the monsters that we may have grown up hearing about or real monsters in the world, but I guess in a sense the way people can be monsters too, depending on how you perceive that. Horror has often been a genre where marginalized voices can explore their fears and identities, kind of jumping off of this question, like the horrors of humanity, if you will. How do you see the interaction or the intersection of queerness and horror playing out in this book, especially the relationship between Ray and Joaquin?
Great question. Yes, definitely there's a connection there. Lots of times, there's a lot of people that struggle with their sexuality, in particular teens, and with their families, and they're always kind of lots of times they're leading a double life. I mean, of course, you have great examples now of teens being able to be more out, but there's still a lot of closeted people that are afraid of what their family and friends will think of them. So in a way, what's going on here is, you have these characters, and in a way, they're all kind of closeted because they all have something that they feel that if the other people, their friends, found that out about them, that it would turn them against their friends would turn against them. So kind of like with Joaquin, he has a secret that nobody knows about, and he's afraid that if Ray finds out in particular, that he's going to lose that friendship. Likewise with Ray, he's afraid that if his friends find out these things about him, he's actually been duplicitous. He's been lying to his friends, which sometimes, a lot of times, closeted people, they cannot be themselves. Even characters like Sophia and Isabella, they are also like Isabella with her whole surreptitiously. She has another agenda for her documentary to expose her friends that they don't know about as well. And then Sophia has all these aspirations. She's always been the one that takes care of the group. But I also wanted to explore, especially with what happens to her. And I don't want to go into too many spoiler territory, but that maybe that inner resentment for always having to be the caretaker of your friends and being the maternal figure that's always has to make sure that everybody's in line. Maybe there's some resentment that comes along with that, and maybe because of the influences of Malicia, that kind of gets magnified.
Yeah. There's something for everyone. There's trauma for everyone, enough to go around. Yes. So kind of jumping back to your experiences or what these stories that you grew up hearing, were there any specific experiences or stories that influenced this story and your writing process of Malicia, as particularly from your own culture growing up?
Well, it's interesting because I mean, I grew up with the stories, and like I said, I've always loved horror, but there was something that happened. It wasn't directly related to the culture, but it's something that happened that actually jump-started the writing of Malicia, because I started writing Malicia in 2017. 2017 was the year of Hurricane Irma, which, as you know, there's also a hurricane in my book. And I remember at the time I was traveling, and all the flights, of course, were canceled. All the flights back to Florida were canceled. And so we had to drive all the way back. And, right after a hurricane, especially, like, everything is dead. So we had gotten back to the airport because we had a rental car that had to be taken back to the Orlando airport. And it was the eeriest thing because when we drove the car into the airport, and when you drive a car in, there's no way of getting it back out again. When you take back a rental car. The Orlando airport was abandoned. There wasn't a single soul in that airport. And then we were trapped in the airport right after a hurricane. To me, and we're wandering through this airport. It was the weirdest thing because you're used to an airport bustling with people and security. Yeah. And here we are just walking through this empty airport. And I started thinking to myself, to me, that's like really creepy. Kind of like it takes me back to Stephen King's The Shining, where you have a hotel that's usually bustling with people, but then it's really scary when there are no people there. So I started thinking about this airport and getting this eerie feeling, like it almost felt like being watched. It was almost like one of those scenarios, Twilight Zone episodes, where all of a sudden all the people disappear. And so that was kind of the germ of the idea, like, what if that whole idea of being in a place that's usually really populated right after a hurricane and there's nobody there and you're trapped there, because we were in essence trapped there because we couldn't even get an Uber driver to pick us up because when they would come and see that the airport was closed, nobody wanted to pick us up. And of course, being in Orlando, that's theme park city. So that and my love for the supernatural, and I started making these connections. Big empty space that's normally populated, theme parks, and some of those stories that I had heard growing up from the Dominican Republic, and that all started to coalesce. And that's when I started writing Malicia.
Abandoned spaces, I think, attract so many people. It's its own genre on YouTube, the urbex or the urban explorers. So definitely, especially when they are supposed to be, like you said, busy spaces, and then there's suddenly nobody there. So I think that's also why hospitals feel extra creepy, is because it's supposed to be filled with life. There are supposed to be people. There are supposed to be interactions happening. And then when you're alone and it's silent, you're like, okay, well, there's nobody here, but there should be. So where are they? That's you did an amazing job of recreating that sense in the book. I had one or two things tabbed from the book. I think one was about, I wanted to ask. So, and we can cut this if it's too much of a spoiler, but the demonic kind of parasite that's in this book, it reminded me a little bit, and I really enjoyed in this. But have you ever seen the movie Wreck, like Record?
Yes, I love that movie. That's one of my favorite horror movies. Yes. Okay,
it gave me that. Was that intentional, or was it just a coincidence? Like maybe it's an homage to that, or just this idea of like a contagious possession?
It's funny you mention it because I love Rec, but I don't remember consciously making that connection while I was writing the book. But I love that movie. I mean, well, the first two in particular.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say there was a conscious decision or an homage, so to speak. It was more like an homage to all the horror movies that I love. So I guess it kind of is included in that.
Yeah, no, it was so good. I was reading it and then, I read through it and I was like, wow, this is, oh my God, like wild chills, whatever, because of how it's happening. And then I think it was maybe like a chapter or two later when it hit me and I went, wait, let me go back and read that again. So I went and I read it again. I was like, oh my God, it's just the faintest reminder of it. So for anyone who hasn't seen that movie, they also remade it in English, but they basically completely ripped it off. They just re-recorded it in English and it's called Quarantine.
Yes.
Which is also, well done, but Rec is
But they got rid of the best part. Because in Quarantine, they got rid of the demonic possession via virus.
Yeah.
Actually, to me, the most fascinating part of it.
Exactly. So if anybody has seen Quarantine, you must go watch Rec. And if you've seen Rec, then if you know, it's such a good movie. I had the opportunity to see that one in theaters recently at an event, and it was just like shook me to my core again because I hadn't seen it in so long. But yeah, just that came up for me, and I wanted to make sure to ask it. And then the last thing I had marked in my book is I'm not going to read it because it's kind of a spoiler.
Okay.
But oh my God, I will say it is it's at the end of the book. I'll tell you, but I won't include it in the episode just so I can give you the context. But I cried. I literally have screaming written in my book here. I underlined it and I wrote screaming, crying, throwing up because it just, oh my God, it got me so good. The entire time I was reading the book, I could just see little Ayden, like, who would have loved nothing more than to be trapped in a haunted theme park with his crush. So yeah, oh my God, I finished it and immediately was crying, and I looked over at my boyfriend and he was like, was it good? Are you okay? And I was like, yes and no. Oh my God.
It's so interesting because even when I wrote it when I was listening to the audio book, and I thought the actors were great, Joaquin and Ray, they really brought that whole aspect to life. And I remember even at that scene, listening to it being portrayed by actors, it actually got to me as well. So.
You're like, that's so beautiful. Who wrote that? Oh, wait.
Yeah, exactly.
It was so good. Oh, my goodness. So is there anything else that you would like to share? Maybe parting words of wisdom for writers or any sort of other, like a spooky story, anything that you have on the mind currently?
Well, actually, in terms of what I'm working on right now,
sure.
I'm actually working on it's not a sequel to Malicia, but it takes place in the same universe as Malicia.
Ooh, okay.
So I actually finished the draft of it. So I'm actually going to be tinkering during the summer to get that in good shape. So hopefully and it's written in a way that you could read each one independently in whatever order, but there's a definite connection there.
Okay.
And it explores more of the Dominican mythology, including some of the mythology that I didn't get to, because there was so much that was cut from this book. There's so much mythology that I was not able to explore, just like there was so much more to Sophia and Isabella. They had so much more. Their backstories were so much darker.
Yeah.
And of course, maybe one day if there's a director's cut, those will come to life.
Oh, absolutely! I would love that. I was definitely hungry for more. Not in a bad way, but just like, oh, I want more. So I'm excited that you are adding more to the universe, the Malicia universe, if you will.
Yes.
That's going to be very, very exciting. And we will be talking more in the Patreon exclusive content about some of the things that didn't make the final cut. So if you are a best girlfriend on Patreon, you will have access to that shortly. But for now, Steven, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for writing Malicia. Can you please tell everybody who's listening where they can follow your work and where they can find the book?
Okay, great. Well, first of all, you're so welcome, and thank you for having me on the show. I'm really honored to be here. You can visit my website, stevendossantos.com. The book is available in, as you see, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. Everywhere books are sold, so not only Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but your independent bookstores, they all have it. So I hope you go out and experience it for yourself. There's more to come, and I look forward to giving you much more of the mythology to explore.
Yay! Thank you so much. And Ghoul friends, I will be seeing you in a bit. Again, if you are a best Ghoul friend on Patreon, go ahead and head on over there to see the bonus content. Bye. Welcome back, Ghoul friends. Again, if you are a best Ghoul friend on patreon.com/Susto podcast, then you have access to extra content, bonus content for this episode. It was a healthy amount of content. I think like 10 extra minutes of a video chat between Steven and I. He was so gracious to offer that to you all on Patreon. He went through some extra, I guess, plot points and character developments that didn't make it into the final cut of the book, which were so good. My jaw dropped several times hearing him talk about that. And he even read an excerpt from the book that made me tear up once when I read the book, and then again as I was listening to him read it to us. It's so good. This book was very healing to the inner little gay little spooky me. And I know that we were doing the curanderismo series, but I was very excited about this book, especially as a horror that features queer characters. It is Pride Month, so how could I not? Had to make sure that we got it in during June. But either way, thank you so much for listening. As always, you can be on a Susto Letters from the Beyond episode. All you need to do is send in your scary stories to me. It can be a story, a video, audio recording, photo, whatever you have that is paranormal or spooky, send it over to me. You already know how. Email, DM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, visiting the website, using a summoning circle, and just telling me directly. I appreciate all your support. Remember that the easiest way to support the show is by interacting with it online, following it, subscribing, all of that good stuff, sharing it with your ghoul friends. But if you would like to support Susto, you can always visit the GoFundMe. The links are in all my social media bios and Linktree, or you can sign up for Patreon. That's patreon.com/Susto podcast. Thank you so much to this episode's patrons. You are Liza, Sadie, Rachel, Alejandra, Luther, April, Mario, Eva, D, Josette, Sam, Angela and Co, Mandy, Jules, Lori, Jeannie, Desiree C, Anna C, Ashes, Neresa, Rachel, Azucena, Rios, Anna, Marlene, Chata, Lainey, Desiree A, Aaliyah, Cynthia, Serena, Iflamenca, Lupe, and Belinda. Thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. I will talk to you all in the next one, and until then, please keep all hands and legs inside the ride at all times. Bye.